Hey, we need to talk. 20 years ago, living in the US, George W. Bush was president. We were in two wars, and looking at the social and cultural situation I was in, I remember having the thought, we're so divided. Something has to be done. This can't go on forever. Now, here we are, 20 years later. Do things look better to you? And in some ways, we're more divided than ever. At the same kitchen table, two parents and three kids live in five completely different worlds. The information they're receiving is completely contradictory to one another. One watches liberal news, one watches conservative news, two watch different podcasts, and one goes to university. And they're all walking around with completely separate sets of facts. Now, I remember the 90s. Everyone in the world agreed with what happened between Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky. No one had any doubt. But there is a lot of variation in opinions about that. Well, what does this mean for the country? What do we tell the children? Should he be impeached? Should we even know about it? There was a great diversity of opinion, but the facts remained consistent no matter who was reporting them. You see, I noticed at one point that whether I liked or disliked the people in charge at a political level, my life remained pretty stable. So I thought, why am I devoting all kinds of time following the news, politics, who's voting for what? My life's pretty much the same, whoever's in there. So after a certain point, I stopped paying attention and moved on with my life. Some things would occasionally catch my attention, but something happened. In 2020, I had more time on my hands, like many of you. And so I was watching different news sources, legacy media, independent media, different people. And there's a story that came up. I heard the following. Innocent woman of color gunned down while she was sleeping in her bed by rogue police. And I heard that. And I remember talking about this with a friend, and I thought, there's no way you can spin this. This is outrageous. Something's got to be done. Those cops are animals, and there's no way you could possibly justify this at all. And then, a few days later, I was watching something else, and I heard a different story reported. What I heard was something along the lines of, police were in a gunfight with known armed and dangerous drug trafficker during which his girlfriend was killed. And I thought, ooh, that's a messy situation. God, what do you do? And then I heard a name. It was the same story that I just told you. It was the same woman that died, but it was reported with completely different facts. And I thought, what's going on here? These aren't even similar stories. How could people even talk about this when they're approaching it from completely different sets of information? And as time went on, I saw many examples of this same kind of thing. But here's the one that really got to me. I was watching the news, legacy media, and I was watching a speech being given by a politician. He was reacting to some event that recently occurred. And I don't even know why I was watching. I think I was waiting for something else to come on. But anyway, I was watching, and I didn't like this guy to begin with. And I could write a multi-page essay on why I didn't like this guy and all of that. But in this speech, he went out of his way to say that he didn't support a certain group of people. And I thought, okay, well, yeah, I went through that kind of neutrally. But then, on that same network that I actually watched a speech on with my own eyes, I saw them report that he loved and supported and celebrated the people that he went out of his way to say that he didn't support, that there's no place for them in the country. And I thought, I don't even like this guy, but you're completely changing the information. You're having him supportive of the villains in this story. And I don't like him, but why do you have to tell a completely different version of what happened? And then I saw this kind of thing happen again and again. And it wasn't just something they said by accident. It wasn't just somebody getting caught up in the wrong information and repeating it secondhand. That particular thing I've seen referred to over and over and over again over the years. And it's just, that's not what happened. I don't even like the guy. That's not what happened. And this caused me to take a step back. And I thought, at a different level than I had accepted before, it was something that I, kind of understood, but it hit me deeper. The media is financially incentivized to divide us. Now, when I say that on the face of it, a lot of you would say, well, yeah. Or maybe, oh, no. Not the good media, not the ones I follow. And I'd urge you to keep listening on to this speech. Because we're going to cover a lot of ground here. Every media organization, for one, independent, legacy, doesn't matter. Their owners support politicians. Now, do you think that they're going to allow their employees to damage their financial investments and donations in those politicians? Are they going to allow them to be painted in a negative light if they do something incorrectly? Are they going to be supportive of the idea that some opposing candidates might have said something or done something that was positive? You see, one of the things they discovered is emotionally charged states sell. Viewership during COVID was extremely high because there was so much fear. What's the death count now? Can I leave my house? What's the protocol? Anger really drives people to view things. Sex gets people to tune in. When a story is just neutral, it doesn't move someone, it doesn't leave a lasting memory, it doesn't get a lot of views, clicks, likes, shares, subs. But if they use inflammatory language, paint someone as a buffoon or a tyrant or an imbecile or a pervert or what have you. If you purposely exclude certain context, you can get 10 times the viewership, 10 times the attention, 10 times the money for that same event being reported on. So what do you think they're going to do? They're going to do the ones that make money. Now, let's turn our heads towards 24-hour news networks. You know what they're great at? I mean, seriously, do you know what they're amazing at? Breaking news. There's been an earthquake, some head of state has died, there's a major shift in the political landscape, and we have affiliates on the ground to bring you the latest. But honestly, most of the time, we don't have those major events that are going to stand out to you all year. So they have to fill it with something. And they fill it with repeated segments and opinion pieces saying similar things that are just going to drive their income and keep you coming back. If you say something that your main audience disagrees with, they might not come back. So you have to say something that not only do they agree with, but it lights a fire in them and it keeps them coming back for more. Now, even if we assume that everyone has positive intentions here, I mean, the news is not an excellent way to bring information. For one, the first reports are almost always wrong. We know way more about the situations 2 years later, and so many of the initial details are completely crazy or fuzzy or inaccurate. We always know more later. Second, especially in complex issues, 2 to 5 minute segment does not allow you to give a lot of context. And if you can leave out some context and then use some inflammatory descriptors, that could get that segment way more attention, bringing in far more money. Now, another way we can look at this capture of the media system are the sponsors. If the sponsors of a podcaster or a network are doing something wrong, immoral, illegal, or even allegedly so, how much attention do you think that's going to get on the news? Probably not much, because they'd just be wasting their money and throwing it out the window when you could just ignore that and keep the cash coming in. You see, I just spent some time talking about mainstream media, legacy media, but let's talk a little bit about podcasters. It's so easy to just make the world a worse place and keep the money coming in by the truckload. All you have to do is find the most fringe, extreme, or hurt or ignorant example of someone hypothetically vaguely associated with the other side. And then you know what you do? Real simple. You watch them and you say, see, I told you. And they're all like that. And they're coming for you, and they're coming for this country, and they're coming for your children. And we have to stop them. And you repeat that over and over and over again. And then it's very easy to begin to see anybody you could vaguely categorize as being on the same side as those folks, as being the same, as being in concordance, in agreement with those people. Now, I'm not here to pretend that fringe folks don't exist. There are extremists, absolutely. But to hear the media tell it, the extremists are the mainstream. And they can only get away with that because we've been ignoring some hard conversations. You know, it's a great thing that we're more sensitive to mental health these days because for far too many generations, there have been marginalized people or people who didn't have power being told to shut up, being told that their thoughts and their feelings didn't matter. Whether it was a parent telling their kid to sit down and shut up and don't speak unless they're spoken to, whether it's someone being told that men don't cry and shut up sissy, whether it's someone shouting slurs and threats to some marginalized group, or whether it's women who just have not had a voice for so many generations. Now, there is a voice, and I'm happy for that. Too many people were abused. Too many people were told to shut up and sit down. And whenever you oppress a people like that, there's a lot of bitterness and a lot of pain that builds up. And you know what? Part of the healing process, that got to come out. Part of the healing process, you have to acknowledge the pain. You have to let it rise. You have to express it. And you have to stand up for yourself and what matters to you. And today, we have greater awareness of mental health than we've ever had before. Therapists and going to therapy, getting some support, it's not shunned. It's not frowned upon. It's celebrated. Many jobs give at least some level of access to some of these services. It's part of the mainstream, and this is good. I'm very glad that we could talk about these issues. And it's so true what they say. Everyone's fighting battles that you don't know about. And unless you walk a mile in their shoes, you don't know what they're going through. You don't know how hard it is for them. So you need to have compassion for people. Don't try and make their days harder. Don't try and make their lives more difficult because they don't deserve it. They're human beings. They have dignity, and we need to treat them with respect. I agree with that 100%. When we're dealing with repressed emotions and this coming out, especially at a cultural level, sometimes when that tipping point occurs, the pendulum swings, and sometimes it swings quite far. And there are some structures and some understandings that we lose in that process, and it is part of the cultural healing process. And I want to tell you that if a friend comes to you in their time of need and you listen to them and give them a safe space to express what they're going through, and you are there for them in confidence, that's one of the most beautiful things you can do in a relationship. Or if you're going to a skilled, licensed mental health expert, some kind of therapist, psychologist, whatnot, and you're sharing, and they're listening to you and trying to support you and give you ways to cope or work through your challenges. I mean, and they give you a safe space. This is wonderful. A lot of my friends are in that field, and I'm so happy they are because they're doing great work. However, outside of a friend coming to you or outside of working with a mental health professional, safe spaces don't exist. The world is closer to being a serial killer than a therapist. And we need to prepare accordingly. Now, because we don't want to hurt people, because we care, we might be choosy with our words. We might stifle some of the things we might say, or some of the jokes we might tell, or memes we could pass around. Because we care. We don't want to make someone's life harder. And this comes with great intention. However, it can be very destructive. Many people have the idea that to protect others from being hurt, that words need to be banned, that ideas need to be censored, speakers need to be censored and deplatformed. But this doesn't get rid of them. This turns them more extreme. This makes them more bitter. In the same way that all the marginalized groups, the Native Americans, the indigenous people around the world, in many cultures, actually probably all, as far as I'm thinking, I mean all the women and all the LGBTQ AI plus people, and so many others, disabled folks, so many others I'm just not remembering at the moment. However, even though all that's true, when given the opportunity to speak, there's a lot of, and this happens with everyone, even in a bad relationship, if someone that wasn't allowed to speak about problems, a lot of bitterness comes out. And when people are keeping silent, it doesn't make the pain go away. It just means it's going to come out some other way, maybe in biting comments, maybe by poisoning relationships and work situations around you, maybe in an explosion of rage. And this is a terrible thing to do to one person, let alone a culture of tens of millions. Because at that scale, you're inviting a level of danger that cannot be denied. And as much as we want to protect people that we care about from offensive words or ideas or comments, as much as we want to shelter them, sometimes, in fact, I would argue always, it's better to say the truth, even if it hurts. Sometimes it's better to share the most traumatizing things that you could possibly say with someone, even if you love them, especially if you love them. It's very important to share information that's as accurate as you understand it to be. And I can almost hear some people go, no, it's not. It's never okay to hurt somebody or to say something that hurts. Well, I'm going to give some extreme examples to illustrate my point. You see, imagine if a parent has a child that goes to school, but one day at school, there's an accident and the child tripped down the stairs and tragically, they passed away. Now, what should you do? Should you tell the parent the truth? Or do you tell them their child ran away, that their child is lost, that their child is just sleeping and they'll wake up one day? No, of course not. You tell them the most horrific thing, the thing that every parent fears that one day they might hear. It's the most traumatizing thing they'll probably ever experience in their lives. But it's the right thing to do. It's the only way they can adapt to the real details in the world. It's the only way that you should deal with such an issue. I'll give you a few more examples. Imagine a person goes into the doctor because they've been feeling strange lately, and the doctor runs a wide battery of tests. And after all the results come back, it looks like that person has, without a shadow of a doubt, an illness with a very high mortality rate. They're probably not going to live very long. Well, what should the doctor do? Should the doctor just say, "Oh yeah, you're good. Go home. You're healthy, clean bill of health. You just have the cold. It's a little weird this year." No. It's the doctor's duty. It's their job to tell them the truth. And from there, because they respect that patient so much, the patient now has the opportunity to decide. Are they going to seek a clinical trial? Are they going to try chemo? Some esoteric surgery? Or are they just going to try and enjoy what time they have left? But they can't make a real choice unless they have the real information. I'll give you one more example. Imagine you've always wanted an amazing romantic partner. And then, after years of searching, you finally find that person you've always been looking for. It's the stuff of fairy tales. And your connection is some dynamic synergy of intimacy and passion. It makes all your dreams come true. You're so happy to be with them and you're so in love. But then, one day, there's a call. They were in an accident and they're not coming home. What would you want that person calling to do? Would you want them to lie to you? Would you want them to say, "Oh, they're just traveling Europe," or "Oh, they'll be fine. Oh, they got lost"? No. As traumatic as it is, as horrifying as it is, you want them to tell you the truth so you can decide what to do with the rest of your life. Now, these were extreme examples, but they serve to illustrate a point. Even if you love someone, and especially because you love someone, you owe them the truth. Now, it might not be the ultimate truth of the universe, but the most accurate understanding that you have. And this isn't some speech about tough love where you just insult people and say, "See, you don't know nothing," and you abuse them with your version of facts. That's not what I'm talking about. Instead, we have to acclimate people to difficulty because it's an unavoidable part of life. We live in a world where sickness, pain, heartbreak, betrayal, corruption, poverty, war, and death are everyday realities. Every relationship you have is going to end in tragedy one day because someone's going to die, someone's going to go first. It's going to be you or them. And you can spin that all kinds of ways, but bottom line, there's a lot of pain that's inherent to life. And by trying to make people distant from what could hurt them, by trying to ban words that could be painful, because it's a losing strategy because there's always a new word they can use. You ban some word like fatty, and then someone's gonna call you hippo. Well, you banned hippo, and then elephant, and then world. Oh, here comes the moon. Like there's always gonna be another word. You can't ban them all. There's strategy that people are using to protect those that themselves and those they love is a failed strategy. Trying to make the world smaller and smaller and smaller and take out the words and the ideas and the concepts that could be provoking, that could be triggering. But at the end of the day, they can't avoid the details of life. And while words can be very painful, I remember some words that really, really struck deep for me. While words can be painful, while ideas can set someone on a wrong direction, the way to combat that is not by banning them, not by trying to shrink the world that people live in so they're not exposed to anything that hurts. It's by empowering people to have the capacity to face and work through and deal with these challenging moments and to expose them to different ideas, different concepts. Not to brainwash them, not to condition them into thinking different ways, but to expose them to differences so that they can handle those differences, so they have a greater tolerance and ability to adapt and work around some of these differences. You see, there's a guy that I really admire. His name is Daryl Davis. Now, Daryl is an amazing musician. He played with so many of the greats. But he's known for something else. You see, Daryl Davis is a black man. And he spent years gaining the trust of and eventually befriending a grand wizard of the Ku Klux Klan. Now imagine the threats and the slurs and the hatred and the bullying that came his way. Imagine that. I wouldn't ask anybody to do something like that. That's way too extreme. But that's not where the story ends. After befriending the Grand Wizard, Daryl Davis was allowed to go to clan rallies and talk. Now you can only imagine, they thought the Grand Wizard was weak. They were insulting him, threatening him, tossing slurs, saying the meanest, most terrible things in the world that you could possibly imagine. And Daryl took it. And he answered them. And after a while, some of them started asking him questions. And some of them thought, well, if he can handle all of us saying all this stuff, maybe I can handle hearing what he has to say. And they found that Daryl was really cool, that he was smart, articulate, helpful, that he was willing to introduce them to musicians that he knew that they were fans of. They found him to be awesome. And because of that good experience that countered their biases and bigotry, because of that, eventually over 200 Klansmen turned in their robes to Mr. Davis because they thought they knew what black people were. They thought they knew what minorities were. They thought they knew so much. But then Daryl gave them evidence to the contrary. But in order to do that, he had to endure hearing and being exposed to a lot of things that he didn't deserve. But that opened a window. And it changed countless lives, not just the 200 plus that turned in their robes, but their families and their friends, and the ripple effects extended, and how many people were inspired by his story. I'm not asking that of anybody. That's extreme. There's a quote that was attributed to Daryl Davis. And I don't know if it's actually his quote, but I'm going to treat it like it was for this speech. Never write people off. You can deprioritize them, but never write people off. And that's what I'm asking you to do. Right now, no doubt, there are people in your life that you dislike. Maybe whole categories of people in the world that you don't trust, that you hate. And I'm not asking you to do what Daryl did, to go to the most extreme fringe of the fringe people and put yourself in physical danger and endure their threats and their horror and their slurs and their bigotry. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm not asking you to go to the most fringe of the fringe extremist people who are either super ignorant or hurt or just have a naturally destructive inclination. I'm not asking you to do that. But we need to start going in a better direction. What we've been doing for all these years is not working. We have to become bigger. We have to become better. Now, hatred is a powerful force. I have a lot of experience with it. When you're trying to stop hating, many people make a mistake. They try and go from one extreme to another. They think, okay, I hate the fact that I have this habit. or I hate this way that I see the world, or I hate this person or hate this group. So now I'm going to love this behavior or group or person. And, maybe in the right circumstance, there are some people who might be able to pull that off, but I haven't seen it. That's too unrealistic. It's like if someone was sedentary all their lives, they never exercised, never worked out. Hey, go set the Olympic broad jump record. It's ridiculous and completely unfair. But I found something that seems to work for the majority of people. Maybe not every stage of their lives, maybe not everybody, but many people could benefit from this idea. You see, you don't begin defeating hatred by trying to love. It's too big of a change. The chemical change in your body is enormous. The habits of the way you think about people, it's too great of a contrast. It's very difficult to make that scale of a change. And then people go back and forth and it doesn't work out. Here is how we overcome hatred. You see, I'm not the enemy of any person or any group. I know there are dangerous people out there. And I think of them like wolves. You see, I love wolves, but I wouldn't advise you let them babysit your children. I believe in redemption, and I believe in forgiveness. But it would take an enormous body of evidence for me to believe a wolf became a person. So this is how I regard dangerous people. I respect that they exist. I don't support their ideas, their actions, but I root for them. I root for what could be the best in them. And I hope one day that comes out. I'm not the enemy of any person, but there are attitudes, ideas, patterns of behavior that are very destructive, and they can overtake any of us given the right situations. Famous Russian quote: "The line between good and evil runs through each human heart." We all have the capacity for great pain, great resentment, great bitterness. And I'm not claiming to be the best. I'm certainly not as smart or kind or loving or articulate or well informed or skilled as I'd like to be. Working on sawing off some of those hard edges myself. But these invisible forces, these ideas, like the motivation to hate, this is what we strive against. The forces that guide us to be weak by shrinking our world more and more to try and hide from what could hurt in an inevitably ineffective journey. To overcome hate, you have to start small. You don't start with love. You don't start with forgiveness. You don't start with any of that. You know how you begin? By being exposed or aware of it, of whatever your target of your hatred is, whether it's a pattern you have, a habit, a way of seeing the world, whether it's a person or a group. And I don't necessarily even mean physically present, but maybe it's a video, maybe it's an interview, maybe it's whatever. And develop the ability to pay attention. And when you feel that reflex to cover your ears, to close your eyes, or to yell, to turn away and shut off the camera, to write them off, like Daryl Davis advised us not to do, to attack them, to insult them. Instead, you ease the reflex to either attack or ignore them, and develop the ability to listen. That doesn't mean agree. That doesn't mean support. That doesn't mean like. That means listen. We don't defeat hate by more hate. We have to rise above it. We have to head in a better direction. I don't have an answer for you. There is no X marks the spot on a map, and I say that's where we're heading. We are heading in a better direction. And what I'm asking you to do is to have the courage to expose yourself to some ideas that you dislike. Because hatred and bigotry can only exist where there is a lack of examples to the contrary in that person's life. And it starts with us. So, here's what I would like you to do. If you are on the right, I'm going to suggest some mainstream left-leaning people to be exposed to. They've all been on podcasts. They've all done shows. So watch 3 of them for each speaker. I'm going to suggest Sam Harris, Jon Stewart, Bill Maher, Crystal Ball, Destiny, Kyle Kalinske, the Young Turks. There are others, but these are some that come to mind. They all have very large audiences, and the reason they have large audiences is because a lot of people like what they're saying. So I'll ask you to, for Jon Stewart, maybe not The Daily Show, but he had the show called The Problem. That's probably a better representation. For Bill Maher, probably not real time because he has to squeeze jokes in there to entertain an audience. But he has his own show called Club Random, where he just talks to people. And I'm not saying you're going to agree with them. I'm not saying you're going to like these people, but watch 3 episodes of each. And then follow them on social media once in a while, maybe once a week, twice a week. Watch a clip from one of them. That's it. That's all I'm asking. If you're on the left, I also have a recommended list to do the same thing with. Tucker Carlson's pretty well known. Patrick Bet-David, Jillian Michaels, Brett Cooper, Glenn Beck, Glenn Lowry. That's a pretty good list. And just watch 3 episodes of each one. and just hear what they have to say. Understand that maybe they're not evil people. Maybe they're just misinformed. Maybe they just have different sets of information they've been listening to. Whether you're on the right or the left, the different lists I gave you, I'm not trying to convert you to one side or another. I'm trying to begin to open up dialogue and open up hearts. And if you go from thinking that the mainstream on the right or the left are Nazis or fascists or commies or people trying to convert your children or what have you, some type of authoritarian or snowflakes or whatever you want to call them, just watch 3 episodes. I'm not saying today, I'm not saying this week, but gradually work through 3 episodes of each one, follow them all, and then just have them occasionally watch a clip. Maybe once a week, watch a clip, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. We waste more time than that all the time. So that's it. And a couple of things are going to happen when you do this. One, you're going to find yourself less bothered by their existence. Two, the sharpness and intensity of your feelings towards the other side is going to be softened a bit. You might not agree with their ideas. You might think they're wrong, but there's a big difference between thinking they're wrong and having the impression that half the country's evil. Now, again, I know there are fringe, really bitter extremists out there. I know. Today's not the day we work on that. We're not doing Daryl Davis kind of work. But for now, let's work on the mainstream. Another thing that's going to happen is you'll be very good at articulating their own ideas. Not just the stupidest version of any concept that anyone ever had on that side, from the most ignorant and malinformed individuals. And then you try and beat that. No. You'll develop the ability to hear, okay, this is the strongest version of what you think. So you can make them feel heard, make them feel seen. And then maybe you could come up with a more convincing argument. You see, the way to defeat misinformation, malinformation, hurtful words and slurs, it's not by shrinking the world. It's by opening your heart. It's by understanding. You don't defeat hatred and bad ideas with censorship. That only strengthens it. And if you try and ban everything, and even if you took over the government and you banned everything, that would just drive it underground and it wouldn't go away. You see, one of the reasons why it's very important to have these conversations, to bridge these divides, to watch some content that might be challenging, it's because if we don't have these conversations, the polarization is going to get worse. And yeah, it hurts if someone says a slur, but it doesn't hurt as much as when a school blows up. When people are driven to the extremes, when people are demonized, it radicalizes them. And right now, we have to de-radicalize the hearts of people all over the world. We have to get people to realize, hey, it's not us versus them. But when you look out, it's our brothers, our sisters, our greater human family. They're like our very self. But they've had a different set of life experiences, different set of pain, of trauma, of information that help them interpret things. I don't root for their specific plans or ideas or agenda to work out, but I root for what's best in them. And it's my deepest heartfelt wish that they and we all can head in a better direction. If instead of trying to shrink the world so we don't hurt, if instead we can open our hearts and our minds and develop the ability to deal with challenging things, we can begin to rebuild bridges that have long been burned. We can have conversations that we wouldn't dare. It's not cool to be the enemy of half of your country, no matter where you are in the world. We need to develop the capacity to talk to one another, to listen to one another. And if we disagree, to be able to make the others feel seen and feel heard enough, that they feel safe and understood enough to hear your point of view and realize that you're not what they thought. Just like Daryl Davis did with the Ku Klux Klan. I'm not asking you to deal with the most extreme fringe of the fringe people in the world. I'm asking you to open your heart and develop the ability to tolerate and talk to and help to de-radicalize the mainstream. I'm not writing off the fringe, I'm deprioritizing them because I can't reach them now. But maybe they'll have friends that'll be de-radicalized who aren't quite so extreme as them. And that can help move them over to be nudgeable, to be accessible to someone else's message. Maybe not mine, maybe not yours. But if we work together, we can all head in a better direction. We can all build a better, brighter future. We have to care about the coming generations more than we care about the bitterness and hurt feelings of the past and that we carry to this very day. We have to develop the capacity to deal with that pain and still work towards building a better tomorrow. Thank you very much.